barrier. So what eventually happened is, WHO came on. The original Bob Scott headed the second major fundraising campaign, but there was a gentleman named Walter Maddox and some others. Jack Davis was involved from in your district, or at least he's buried in your district. He was from Bermuda at the time. But anyway, the Rotarians gave 240, what ended up being $248 million. They could make it, remember, they could make a goal of 12 million a few years before. And because they found the right thing to tackle, polio eradication, that a lot of people identified with, that a lot of people had family members and others who had dealt with polio, and they were able to raise 248 million. And despite, a lot of progress over the years, but a lot of setbacks, the John Severs of the world stuck with it, and the Rotarians stuck with it with him. They've never given up. Their contributions are good. Just this morning, we have these positions called End Polio Now coordinators, and you had some from your district. I'm not sure if Duncan Conrad or who it is the polio coordinator. Is it Duncan, Bob?
Yep.
Yeah, he's the one for your district. But this morning we had a call, and Rotary, they have zones, but then they have these regions, 41 regions. But anyway, this morning's call, we had 69 of these coordinators, even though there's only 41 of them, on the call, because we also had some incoming ones from next year. We had a scattered other Rotarians. But again, it just showed me the dedication of Rotarians to the cause. These are the individuals who work with districts and clubs trying to raise the $50 million a year so that we get the full match from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They were from every continent, save Antarctica, of course. And, it's tough. Fundraising's tough, where polio was once, a top of the mind disease to Rotarians, to everyone. It's less so in 2024. It makes it a challenge. But, Rotarians themselves, cash giving this year is, except for one contribution last year that we received from the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, cash giving is up. Donations of district designated funds are up. The monies they have in their share accounts, and we're not quite at the goal. June is when a lot of the money comes in. We're actually quite a bit away from it, but they're determined to get as close as possible. It was announced this morning that Mrs. Burler, a woman from India, in the family foundation they have working with the Burler Group, had given another $1 million. I think she's done it for like 15 straight years now. And, it ought to warm all of our hearts that, the Rotarians have stuck with it, and that we've made great progress. When Bob and Wilf and others, amongst you, worked on it, way back, when Rotary really got involved, there were 125 countries that still had the endemic wild polio virus. I think Bob probably visited 100 of them. I don't know. Over the years to, try to encourage the governments there to take on the programs. And now we're down to the 2 countries with endemic polio, Pakistan and Afghanistan. And so and then we also have these variant polio. So let me talk a little bit about that, where we stand with that. But before I get to that, I also want to mention the importance of advocacy. We also, in addition to, the Gates Foundation now being the #1 contributor, last year Rotary was second to the polio eradication effort. The U.S. government was third. But I want to mention Canada has been with us forever. And there's going to be a Rotary Institute in Toronto in September, I think. And, preliminary indication, not final, is that the Canadian government will probably be there to announce their next pledge for the next 3 years. We have Bob and Wilf used to be on the committee for a long, long time. And now it's transitioned. We have Dean Roars from British Columbia, Jennifer Jones from Ontario, and I think I'm forgetting one other person who were on that committee. And they've met with the Canadian officials. Actually, Jennifer had dinner with Stephen Harper, of all interesting people, a month or so ago in New York, a private dinner with just really her and 2 other folks that were at a meeting, and had a good discussion on polio and the efforts. And obviously, the current government has been supportive, and really all the governments, Paul Martin when he was there, and so many others. They've all been supported, but we're very hopeful the Canadian government will be announcing a new pledge, and it's hugely important. Particularly the UK has not been, United Kingdom has not been as generous of late. So, the government appears poised to do it. We don't know the exact amount yet. We don't know the exact date, but they're looking for opportunities to announce it. And that's, really good news coming from Canada. And, in the rest of the country, Saudi Arabia wasn't Rotary, but they just pledged 500 million over 5 years. And they haven't contributed in years. So, that was encouraging. France has stepped forward, Australia, Japan, so many other countries continue to do so, but increasingly we're depending on Rotarians. Our 50 million is the nucleus that really encourages all these others to give. They hear that Rotarians are still behind it. They hear that we still have confidence, and this advocacy that we do, not only looking for money, but also the Rotarians trying to keep their countries in line and on track. Bob used to visit a lot of world leaders, and he'd go visit them with the local Rotarians saying, we need your help to make sure this immunization drive goes well. And it's that advocacy over all the many years Rotary has worked on this, both to the governments for money as well as to the countries where we work has made a difference. So Pakistan, right now we have, it's either 11 or 12 wild polio virus cases so far this year. That's the same number as we had for all of last year. It's not the greatest news, but we quite frankly could see it coming. We were getting positive environmental samples before we saw cases indicating that polio was circulating in more areas than we had seen recently in both Pakistan and in Afghanistan. The governments there have been interesting to work with those governments. Pakistan changes leadership all the time, very different factions. The provinces or states, provinces in the Canadian example, they call them provinces. Those are highly independent. Sometimes there are different political parties, and every time in the national government, every time there's an election, you have to work with a whole new group of folks. And it was interesting, just about 3 weeks ago, in the same week, the health minister of Afghanistan was retired, to put it politely, and the head of the polio program in Pakistan was replaced. So both of our key countries had major changes in leadership in the exact same week. And not only was in Pakistan, it was both the new health minister and the new head of the polio program all in the same week. So three of the four key positions in those two countries changed simultaneously. So it was a challenge for the Rotarians there. Aziz Memon, Rotary Polio Chair in Pakistan, to work with the new leadership, and Mohammed Ishaq Niazman, a Rotarian in Afghanistan, to work with that. And the Taliban de facto government in Afghanistan is working very closely with us. They have opened up house-to-house vaccinations to the entire country, except for the city of Kandahar. We were open to the rest of Kandahar province, but not actually to the city. And that is just a huge improvement over what we've seen the last 10 years, where all of the countries have been open for vaccinations and open in the way we most want to do it, which is house to house. So there's a major effort now to work with all of those authorities in Afghanistan, and particularly with some of the new leadership. And I don't go to Afghanistan. I know Wilf did when he worked with Lynn Brock heading a relief effort there years and years ago. And I'm not sure if Bob Scott's ever been there, but
no.
Yeah, under the political situation, I don't go there, but fortunately we have Rotarians who do, and our partners work there. So we, even though we've seen it's about half the cases in Afghanistan and half in Pakistan, we're reasonably confident that we're on a path to move forward with the increased access in Pakistan. The Prime Minister there is having his polio task force meeting on Monday. There's going to be a very, very high level delegation meeting with the Prime Minister from our partners Aziz Memon will be representing us there, but the meeting with the Army chief, which is a major player in Pakistan. And, so, the cases are disappointing and it involves missing children, it involves people in very small areas of the country where people travel a lot from them, where all the kids aren't getting immunized. And it just shows the importance of very strong campaigns and to get it done. In both of those countries, Rotary provides more than half of the operating costs of the immunization days. We're providing the vaccines. In Pakistan, where they have 2 or 3 full national immunization days, we're funding fully the cost of one of them. We're funding the partial cost of the other 2, plus we're fully funding what they call subnational immunization days and other consequential geographies in the country. So our financial commitment in Pakistan and in Afghanistan, we're also funding the programs, the communications, the social mobilization that convinces parents to get the drop. So, if we're going to see an end to polio, it's going to be, Gates has given a lot of money and he has a very high profile, but a lot of what happens in the background, the funding of operations, that's where the Rotary dollars go, and it's where our priority has been. In Africa, we've seen way too many polio variant cases. They switched from one vaccine to another about 6 years ago. There's a new report that's about to be issued that said the switch was a mistake. The exact words in the report, Roland Suter was one of the co-authors. Bob Scott knows Roland. They're referring to it as an unmitigated disaster. And, that's very strong words coming from the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. But they have to admit that because of vaccines, that shortages at the time that they should have planned for, and as well as for not immediately responding to outbreaks. They didn't get in front of it fast enough, and it got a little bit out of control. This year, the cases are about 60. They're about half of what the cases were last year. But the kids who get this polio variant or circulating vaccine-derived polio, the damage to them and to their families is exactly the same as with the wild polio virus. So, it's increasingly clear we need to do it. And the path forward to solving these is, one, to continue our financial support, but it's also to better integrate with other programs because, we've been polio drops so often that people are looking for us to do other things. So we need to really make sure we're giving those polio drops and we're providing other services at the same time. There's measles vaccines now. There's the vitamin A drops, which have saved 2.5 million lives, and all these other things we need to use to win the hearts and minds of everyone. We also need to really improve our surveillance, the identifying quickly of polio cases. And, we remain optimistic. Every year there seems to be challenges. I did Bob one time, suddenly Tajikistan had hundreds of cases, and, you have those blips, and, it's, we seem tantalizingly close, and then we have a little slip up. And then we try to get in front of it, and I hope we're going to get in front of it. But, no matter what, you've all heard the numbers, 20 million people are walking on Earth as a result of Rotary having begun these efforts and working with our partners. And we're, avoiding all these cases. Yeah, last year we provided drops to children at 850 million times. Some of the kids we hit 3 times, so not 850 million, but we had 850 interactions with children and parents at which we provided the oral polio vaccine. It's really amazing. It's amazing what Rotarians have accomplished. It's amazing how the pattern was set by the early leaders of them being willing to work with an NGO. And that was because, they had people like Bob Scott, people like Wolf Wilkinson and others, John Sever, who they trusted. And we also came forward with the monies that all of you donated. So I've gone on quite some length and a lot of optimism, but also some straight talk about not everything has gone right. And it requires us to recommit ourselves to getting it done. And again, I thank you all for your generosity, your interest, and looking. I can't see everyone's faces right now because I'm spotlighted, but it's just your district's been amazing. Not only the leadership you provided, but the continuous contributions, the the polio events you continue to have every year, particularly around World Polio Day, and there in, I want to say Coburg, but it might be Oshawa, and other places. So anyway, I've probably, Bob, you told me 20 minutes, and I'm looking at 7:29.
Yeah,
and,
so
I think I might have started about 9 minutes after. So
you did.
Yeah.
You did very well, Michael. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Does anybody got any questions for Mike? Scott?
Yeah, Mike, get questions. You talk about hundreds of millions of dollars and whatnot for someone like myself to explain it to others as to where does all that money go when there's seems to be so little cases now?
Yeah.
How is the money used to and continues to be needed towards the eradication?
Good question, Scott. The main thing is, as I said, we had 850 million, children who we provided drops to at different times. The cost in Pakistan is 76 cents per child. The cost in Afghanistan is about $1.26 per child. So it averages about $1. So that's where the major expense goes. We also are funding 146 laboratories around the world that get the fecal samples and figure out if there is in fact polio. We're funding quite a bit on social mobilization, the whole efforts to convince people to continue that vaccines are important, to take polio drops. We're spending a very small, very, very small amount of money on fundraising and on overhead staff. The polio staff is about 6 people. Very, very, very small staff. It's really, the whole system depends on volunteers, Rotary clubs, and individuals. But we're buying vaccines. A lot of the money in recent years is the outbreak response in Africa. They need vaccines. They need to pay the workers, and we have invested. The partnership is investing now out of the whole budget of $940 million for all of this. They're funding. It's about $400 million for outbreak response, and for continuing to ensure that all of the areas that have become polio-free are remaining polio-free. The one place we don't spend money is India. The government, as a result of Rotarian advocacy, is totally taking over the cost of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any other questions?
Yeah, Bob.
Lars.
Yeah. First of all, Mike, thank you for doing this, and you are the right guy to build up the enthusiasm and to collect the fund. And I should know some of the answer myself, but we may need Bob Wallace to help us too. Yeah, we collect money, but or raise money. But if I recall correctly, and I think you can be blunt in this group because there are good people on the call. The big majority of Rotarians don't give money to polio, if I recall correctly, and Bob Wallace would probably be able to give exactly the percentage of members in our district.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lars, and it's something like 5% of Rotarians contribute to the to polio eradication. I did a report on the weekend for the leadership team, and our polio donations are okay, but we're lagging. We're about 15% lower than we were last year and the Rotary year. So I sent an email to clubs to try and, you got 2 weeks left in the year to try and up your ante there. But yeah, we're something like 30% of Rotarians contribute to the foundation, and it's substantially less to polio.
Thank you for that question, Lars. We need to focus on that. One thing we have been focusing on is trying to get more clubs participating. When I say clubs, the members of clubs are the clubs themselves. a few years ago, we were about 43% of the clubs in the world were participating. Now we're at 53.6%. It's gone up every single year. It's still way too low. A lot of the clubs that have no participation at all are in India. There's a ton of clubs there, and there's a feeling that, you know, the polio is finished. And so we're working heavily in India to make them, the newer Rotarians, feel a part of it. But in all the clubs, you know, we need to freshen up our messaging. I think we need to make sure people know that we're not only eradicating polio, but we're helping out with so many of these other needs at the same time. It's the polio staff that always steps forward to, you know, they're the primary vaccinators and whatever in so many of these African countries. And, you know, while for a lot of times we don't want to talk about that a whole lot because it, you know, what you're supposed to be working polio, you're not working in other things. But what we've discovered is in order to reach the children and to have the staff available, particularly with the way we do the mass immunization campaigns, we need the staff to be working on those other other diseases as well at the same time. And you know, I think you'll see more and more talk without changing our overall mission. It's all about eradicating polio. That we're needing to do the plus in polio plus, and you know, hopefully Lars and Bob, that, you know, if people understand fully what's being accomplished with, and it's not just polio eradication, I think there'd be more focus and more generosity. We also need, you know, a lot of the governors don't talk about it at all. They go to their talks, no mention of it. And even the directors, and I even was at a meeting at the past presidents at the convention in Melbourne. And I said to all the past presidents, every time you talk, you need to talk about polio. And if you're in a meeting with the president-elect, the president nominee of Rotary, and they don't talk about polio, you need to go up to them afterward. And what I didn't realize was the next presenter after me was Gordon McIntyre, and he was sitting in back of me. And basically I said, "You got to tell Gordon." And everyone kind of looked at me. And you get the message. You know, he obviously talked a lot about mental health everywhere he went, but he always talked about polio. In the June Rotary magazine, he talks a lot about polio. But we need the leadership to talk about it, and we need the club presidents to participate. You know, I would hope that every governor would, you know, encourage every Rotarian to give $100. This Polio Plus Society is helping out a tremendous amount too, in terms of in a lot of districts, people willing to give $100 a year each year, committing to until polio is eradicated. We don't have an exact number because it's a district administrated program, but there's tons and tons more Rotarians giving as a result of that who haven't been given.
Okay. Okay, Ron, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mike. I wanted to pick up actually on some of your last comments here about the plus in Polio Plus. And what I'm going to say, I'd be surprised if this is a surprise to the longtime Rotarians and our leadership. I would suggest that the reason we're getting poor uptake amongst Rotarians for contributing funds to Polio Plus, and why leaders are reluctant to mention Polio Plus, is a shockingly high percentage of Rotarians don't believe in vaccination, period. So when they don't believe in vaccination, to expect that they're going to do anything for polio is a pipe dream. And you know, others have suggested that we use some straight talk and maybe get blunt and say some things that people have concerns about and wondered about and have just been reluctant to talk about. And so I'll be the one to put that on the table. We talked about, and just so you know, it's not like I'm a new Rotarian and this is my first Polio Plus talk. I've been over 25 years. I'm a member in Lars Club, which you should know about in case you want to track me down to talk about some of these things further. We talk a lot about Afghanistan and Pakistan. I've suggest two countries that we really need to talk about, especially on this call. Two countries that we're all familiar with here are Canada and the United States. This is where we have the biggest problems. And it's not polio specific, it's vaccination in general. The number of Canadians and Americans who oppose vaccination, or to put a polite political spin on it, they have vaccine hesitancy. is shockingly high. And that goes all the way up through Rotary leadership to recent, in my personal experience, past international presidents who are still advocating for international travel in 2020 and 2021, when clearly that was the worst possible thing to be talking about. So I think the plus in Polio Plus needs to be about vaccine education, where we think we're making progress. Actually, I was very pleased. I've heard, almost everything that's been talked about tonight, dozen or more times. But I'm glad this time that nobody went like this and said, we're this close, we're this close. I'm so sick and tired of that. And I think now we all agree we're not this close. It's widened, now we're this close, and now we're this close, and now we're this close. And the reason is vaccine hesitancy. The people are not vaccinating. I'll get to you in a second, so let me finish. We've got people in Ontario, they haven't vaccinated their children for measles. We had a young child recently die here of measles. All of these diseases are making a comeback, and we may think we're making progress on the war of or the battle about polio, but we're losing the war on vaccination.
Ron, I have to disagree with something you've said. I find a very high level of Rotarians understand the benefits of vaccination. And I just, nowhere do I go where I find Rotarians talking down vaccinations. Yes, there'll be some isolated people, isolated pockets. And yes, there were political candidates in both of our countries, I'm more familiar with my own, who speak the anti-vaccination language. But I look at my own community, in my own state. Last year, we had the highest level percentage ever of kids going to school who had been fully vaccinated. It was like 98%. The citizens were asked just before COVID to look at religious and other objections to vaccines, and there was never a vote that was a citizen initiative that lost more badly than trying to provide religious and other exemptions to polio. So, there are going to be people. They're going to be people who make political causes. But the issue of why we haven't eradicated polio is because of leaders in countries and places that haven't allowed us into their communities.
Exactly.
The people who are refusing vaccinations are 2-3%. It's a very low percentage. Yes, there's an anti-vaccine movement out there, but I think every club that's on this call ought to have someone speak at their club that emphasizes the importance of vaccinations and what vaccinations accomplish. I think there's a real role here for Rotary. The Rotary Board has endorsed vaccinations, not only for polio, but generally. And I would agree with you. We ought not to be afraid to speak out. I see Murray Verso on the call, Dr. Murray Verso from Australia, who's joining us, I believe, tonight from Australia, or tomorrow morning. And, they have some of those same issues I'm sure, in Australia, but they're, if I might allow it to go to Murray, for instances, to explain, as a Rotarian from another part of the world, what the experience is there.
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to join you today. I think this is fabulous that the district is running such a session as this. And I saw this promoted on the Polio Plus Society Facebook page. And I always enjoy listening to Mike and hearing a bit more. In terms of the anti-vaccination, no, we don't find that's a massive problem in Australia. Our immunisation rates for polio in our community are around the 95%. Although admittedly, it's dropped a percentage or so in the last 18 months, 2 years. So there is a small anti-vaccination movement. My experience, though, amongst Rotarians, it's almost unheard of to be anti-vaxxers. I think that district leaders, district governors and so forth are overwhelmed with so many responsibilities that they have that they, unless they're reminded of the end polio causes, Rotary's #1 priority, they don't think of adding it into their presentations when they're visiting clubs and so forth. We have 20 districts in our zone. And for the first time ever, we have exceeded $1 million in terms of fundraising this year, which is something we're quite proud of. It may not sound a lot to you guys, but it is a lot in our terms. So people are talking more and more, and I put most of the growth of fundraising down to the Polio Plus societies that are developing amongst our districts. Well over half our districts have the Polio Plus societies. And not only does that fundraise, but it also regenerates the conversation about polio at club level, which I think is useful. But I would certainly advocate that every club has a presentation at least once a year on polio and vaccination matters in general, and particularly the various aspects of Polio Plus, the plus in polio, because I think that's a real seller for people who haven't thought about what the plus means in Polio Plus. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Thanks, Murray. Thanks, Mike. So I'm going to move on, and looking at the time here, we've got another part of the Rotary Foundation is our funding of scholars. And we have one with us tonight. I'm going to call on Vyana to join us and give us a little bit about how the Rotary Foundation scholarship has affected her. So go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Bob, and thanks everybody for having me here. So just to introduce myself, my name is Vyana. You can remember it because it's like Diana, but with a V. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight about my journey as a global grant scholar, kind of what the scholarship meant to me, and sort of what I've been up to in the last few years since winning. So I'm originally from Toronto. I think this crowd tonight is more international than what I realized, but I think there's a lot of people here kind of from Ontario, GTA kind of area. I'm half Italian, half Canadian. And I think as a result of this sort of cross-cultural upbringing, I've always been super interested in other countries and cultures and languages. And kind of a result of that, through a lot of my education, I've been able to live abroad in 5 different countries and speak 5 languages to varying degrees of fluency, I'll add. But I just wanted to give a quick background on me, because I think that will help contextualize some of what I chose to do with the Global Grant Scholarship. So I won the scholarship for the, I don't know if you call it 7070 or 7070 district, but I won it for my Rotary district back in 2016. And this was when I was pursuing or about to pursue my Master's of Public Administration at the London School of Economics, or LSE for short, and was planning on specializing in economic development and public policy. So in looking at a variety of different scholarships, the Global Grant Scholarship stood out to me because Rotary has such one of the main focuses is on economic and community development, or I think at the time that was how they called it, and it felt very aligned with what I was planning on doing for my studies. So for me personally, I really view public policy as kind of a vehicle for positive change, especially among people who are quite disenfranchised. And this has been a thread that has woven through a lot of my academic career, but also some of my professional career. In specifically getting the Global Grant Scholarship, I put together a very extensive application and was interviewed by a panel of 6 Rotarians from around the GTA. And to say I was elated when I found out that I was the winner of the scholarship that year would be a massive understatement. And for me personally, like, I have always held such a very deep sense of respect and gratitude to Rotary as an organization for giving me the opportunity to pursue my master's through this scholarship. And so I won in 2016, we're now in 2024, and kind of stemming from that sense of gratitude I have for Rotary, I always like to kind of share my story at events like these and still keep in touch with some of the 6 Rotarians who are on the selection committee even to this day. So I'll jump forward a little bit to what I did during my year for which I won the Global Grant Scholarship. So this was my first year of my 2-year MPA, at LSE, at the London School of Economics. And I really feel like, for me, the scholarship allowed me to experience what was one of the best years of my life, just very frankly. Personally, academically, professionally, from so many different angles. And I will just say, as a piece of context, LSE, excuse me, LSE was one of the most challenging academic experiences of my life. When I was doing my undergrad in Canada, I was always like a straight A student and graduated with an almost 3.9 GPA. Whereas at LSE, it was extremely grueling, and it was probably the only time academically I've been in a situation where I could try my absolute hardest and there is still a chance that I will fail. But the reason why I mention this is because I was in a cohort of 79 very incredible individuals from around the world who are all pursuing their MPA at LSE as well. And I think that we all had this collective struggle that really bonded us together. And some of the friends I made when I was in my first year at LSE are really some of my best friends, even to this day. And in even just a week's time, one of my friends from LSE, who's from Chile, she's actually coming to Canada for the first time in her life to come and visit me. So these are relationships that still mean a lot to me and are very involved in my life, even today. So while I was in my first year at LSE, as I mentioned, it was a 2-year program that I did. I applied for quite a competitive program called a dual degree, which is where instead of continuing my second year at LSE, I can continue my second year at one of LSE's partner institutions. And the one I was most interested in was Columbia University. So from the 79 people in my cohort at LSE, only 4 of them are chosen to go to Columbia. And I was one of the very lucky 4 who was chosen. And again, continuing my education in public policy, in economic development, but also in gender as well, and learning about what are some ways through public policy that we can support some of the most vulnerable people in the world and in countries around the world. So during my master's, I interned at the Gates Foundation in London, a large, I think, partner of Rotary, it sounds like. And I specifically worked in UK government relations and helping to do various coordination work between the UK government and the Gates Foundation, which are 2 major funders of what I'll categorize as development work more broadly. And then after my MPA, I worked for Harvard University, but not based in the US. I was actually based in India because I was a research manager for a portfolio of projects related to women's economic empowerment in Bihar, which is one of the poorest states in India. And what feels very cool in many ways is when I was putting together my application for the Global Grant Scholarship 2 years before working at Harvard, I was really outlining a lot of my vision for my career going forward, and it included doing grassroots level field work on public policy research and helping very low income individuals, which is what I was doing when I was working in India. The organization I worked at, the research group at Harvard, was really trying to be a bridge between the voices of quite marginalized, very low income people and what is already a very low income state in India and their government. And we worked with the government, we worked to do research with these individuals and then worked with the government to help them design and redesign their policies to better meet the needs of these people. And in terms of what I'm up to today, so I'm still working in economic development, but based in Toronto. So I'm a senior policy advisor with the government of Ontario, specifically in the Ministry of Economic Development. As you can probably imagine, working on economic development in Ontario versus in India is like a completely different ballgame. But I work to support the government in various different initiatives, whether that's helping the government come up with a strategy for engaging with Indigenous communities or engaging with small businesses. That's kind of all under the purview of my role. And in my role specifically as like a nonpartisan civil servant, I get to do the work that I love doing the most, which is doing things to help build a more sustainable and equitable society. And I feel like I've tried to do that a lot through my educational career and through my professional career as well. And I really like the challenge of trying to address these very real world, if you will, issues through policy. So I'm kind of mindful of time. I think the last thing I'll just mention quickly, because I think one of the prompts was what I see myself doing going forward. And I think like I've had the opportunity to live in many different places around the world, but my family is in Toronto, and I see myself being in Toronto and being in the Ontario public sector kind of from here on out. And I hope if I get the opportunity in roles that I'm able to exert more influence in how decisions are made and how certain policies are made. So I'll leave it at that for now, but I just wanted to end off by saying thank you for having me. As I said earlier, it's always such a treat for me to be able to speak at these events, since Rotary is an organization I just hold in such high regard. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Vyana. Is there any questions? Murray.
Well, thanks. If I may, Vyana, fascinating to hear your life story, and congratulations on your career. As part of the Global Grant Scholarship, you're supposed to have a sponsoring Rotary Club and a host Rotary Club. I'm interested to know how much contact you had with Rotary during your time in London.
Yeah, so my host Rotary Club was actually not based in London, but based just outside of London. But I did a variety of things with my club there. And one of the most like special things to me is pretty early on in my time in the UK, they had a gathering of all of the global grant scholars from across the UK. This was just outside of London, and made like a weekend out of it. And through that, I got to meet other people, even other people from LSE specifically, who are global grant scholars from all around the world. And then beyond that, I had attended various meetings and did some various like weekend trips to my host club as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Virginia.
Not to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would you say, what would be your response to what's some of the biggest challenges we've got in Ontario?
Oh, that's a good question. I think one of the things that immediately comes to mind, and maybe this is a bit of a Toronto skewed answer because that's where I am right now, but is I would say affordability. It's something that's affecting obviously individuals quite tremendously, but we're also seeing a lot of ripple effects of how this affects small business. I mean, it's one of a whole bundle of related things. It's like affordability. It's also like cost of living, interest rates, like all of the things that have been going on over the last few years. So yeah, I would say there's kind of various things that on the surface almost might not seem like they are directly relevant to the business sector, or specifically in the work I'm doing now, it's with small businesses. But we're seeing a lot of concerns come out with respect to affordability, but also with respect to just like various mental health crises that are going on, and small businesses being in some ways caught in the crosshairs and on the front lines of that too.
It'd be interesting to, it would be interesting to have some discussions about maybe the role of Rotary clubs in Ontario, and how maybe we could talk to local communities in terms of being able to, what sort of projects would help them. So just a thought to put in the back of your head. Maybe we can make something like that work at some point in time.
For sure.
Anyone else?
I would, if I could,
Wilf?
I would just the going by my club and the clubs that I've talked to since the years I was president, there has not been much emphasis, in my opinion, on the Rotary with regard to the eradication of polio, and I didn't know whether we need to try in our own district here and then districts throughout Canada and throughout North America to provide more of that emphasis. I know we heard a very good message from my good friend Mike McGovern, but are clubs talking about polio eradication like they used to? Maybe that's a question for Mike. I don't know.
From my experience in our district, no, it could be a lot more. I'm just looking at the numbers of donations to polio and the clubs that participate. We're about 10% of our clubs don't contribute anything to polio eradication, Polio Plus. So we clearly need to do more. Virginia?
So, well, one thing to add is one of the speakers at our district conference in 2024 will be a polio survivor. So we'll start in that effort to raise the awareness and just the importance. So
Great.
Good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
David, you got your hand up and you're on mute.
You're on mute, Dave.
Dave, you're muted.
There we are. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Don't forget that we will have on October 17 the World Polio Day live from the Rotary Global Classroom. We're going to be broadcasting all over the world everything about polio. So stay tuned. Anybody who really wants to get involved again and get rejuvenated, and I'm hoping Mike McGovern can join us. Mike, that's a little invitation.
Thanks.
What was that date?
October 17. We'll be broadcasting live from the Rotary Global Classroom at Durham College in Oshawa, Ontario. And we'll be updating everybody on what's going on in the polio world as we speak. And we'll have 10 Rotary clubs from Durham region there. We'll probably have another 35 clubs from all over the world joining us at that time too. And we're going to bring in the top Rotary speakers about polio. And we do this every year. This will be the 5th broadcast that we broadcast live. So please stay tuned, and we will make sure that gets out to every district and every zone in North America, and the Polio Society as well on Facebook.
Thanks, David.
Oh, good.
Where am I going here? Peter Gorham.
Vyana, I picked up almost a throwaway comment in what you said about getting a job in a nonpartisan role with the Ontario government. I'm sort of wondering how many roles are subject to partisanship, and does partisanship play a big part in what's going on?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that just because I encounter sometimes in my own life, if I tell someone I work for the provincial government, they think I work for the Progressive Conservative Party. And I think in working as a nonpartisan civil servant, there's various sort of things in place to like put a separation between the partisanship. It's always kind of a bit of a dance because the nonpartisan civil servants will carry out the agenda of whoever is in power. But we're also never doing any, I guess, like political bidding, if you will. I had previously, earlier in my career, in the Ontario public sector, I'd worked in the Legislative Assembly, and especially when I worked there, I always had to tell people I'm in a nonpartisan role because that is a obviously hyper-partisan environment. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Peter? You're muted. All right. We haven't figured it out after how many years? Go ahead, Peter.
We figured it out. It's not that we don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to sort of emphasize some of what Ron said and also what Mike said, but I want to ask a question as well. I think we need to, we have for what, 20 plus years at least, emphasized polio, but we really need to start emphasizing the plus part of it. And I've asked a number of people and they say, well, if we emphasize the plus part, we're downplaying polio. Well, I don't believe that's true. But the question I wanted to ask is, have we in Canada and in the United States, because we've been polio free for as long as we've been polio free, become complacent about polio generally?
Anybody want to jump in? I think the answer to some extent is yes. Younger generations have no idea what we're talking about when you talk about polio. I know my kids are in that generation where I have to explain why I went to India and what we were doing. And that I think applies to overall vaccinations as well. My kids are in their early 40s and they have friends of theirs that are in the anti-vaxxer stage. So yes, absolutely.
One of the things,
Okay.
one of the things that I try and do when I'm confronted with that question, polio, we don't have any more polio. I talk about the iron lung and try and explain to the 40-year-olds what it is and when we got rid of it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm looking at, John, one last question.
Hi, Vyana. Good to see you again. Probably don't remember me anyway, but that's beside the point. But several years ago, even 3 or 4 before you won the scholarship, Rotary really liked to have people go from Canada and be immersed in perhaps India or Pakistan or anywhere else. But as the focus of the schools, and certainly in UK, and some more a little in France and Germany too, there's a great focus of people ending up there. Did you find that your collective experience with people from other countries sort of made up in any way for if you had been, say, to India? Do you think it worked that way too?
Thanks for your question. Also nice to see you, John. Are you asking about like the international aspect specifically of my experience?
Yes, really, that instead of being in whatever country you may have chosen to be, now the focus is in a smaller group, and especially in UK, and especially in the avenues that you chose to go to. Did you find that you had a lot of collective experience with other scholars and other students to give you a sort of cosmopolitan experience rather than a focused one. And perhaps the cosmopolitan experience with the world the way it is better than Rotary focusing, as we did before, on a specific area that the scholar would go to.
I think, yeah, my experience was super international, and that really, at least that like to me, like made my experience, especially for the year at LSE. I think of like the 79 students in my program, only 2 or 3 of them were from the UK, and the rest of us were from everywhere else. And I guess I can't really speak as much to the second part of your question on like Rotary's focus, but I think anytime I had the opportunity to get together with other scholars, which they sometimes had facilitated among like the Rotary clubs in the UK, I also felt similarly. It did tend to be, at least in the UK then, it did tend to be a lot of people from the US, but also many people from Asia, from other parts of Europe, because I think at least when I won the scholarship, one of the conditions was you have to study abroad. So yeah, that was one of the best parts for me.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It's nice to see you, by the way.
You too.
Okay, so looking at the time, I want to wind it up here, close it. I want to thank both our speakers, Mike and Vyana, for joining us tonight, and it shows great examples of how we as Rotarians and the foundation are making a difference in people's lives. Vyana in particular as one person, but the children of the world that are walking because of our work on polio. So again, both of you, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to put you on the spot, Virginia, who's 12 days away from the big job. Do you want to close off the meeting?
Sure. I think it's what I found really interesting was Murray's comment on, I think it was Murray who commented on just seeing programs like this where we're talking about foundation issues. And I know we do membership, and we've done a number of others with our Tuesday talks. It's a way of exposing members to just the international aspects of Rotary. And I just think we need to do, just like we need to do a better job of letting members, particularly new members, know about the Polio Plus campaign. Also about these sessions where they get to hear from experts, or certainly I would call expert Rotarians around the world. So thank you to both Mike and to Vyana.
Okay, thank you very much, Virginia, and to our guests tonight and everyone who joined us on the call. This is the last one until we start back up in September, and we have more Learning Tuesdays scheduled in September, topics to be decided, but stay tuned, and you'll get information about what we'll be talking about in the new Rotary year. So with that, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you soon.
Night to all.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Bob. Take care.
Thank you.